Agreed. They're fast. They'll rip right through our fighters. Vanguard, prioritize targets.
It's the dream of many Star Wars fans the world over to pilot your own X-Wing, or in my case a TIE Fighter from the Star Wars universe in epic battles to the death. So how does this title fare, considering it'll have a lot of eyes on it? It's a first-person only flight sim that offers dogfights, defensive, offensive and escort-based missions in story and PvP multiplayer. It's set just after the events of Return of the Jedi, so the Empire are understandably annoyed, and this of course immediately pleases my good self and many other fans, as we get a proper Star Wars and the fighters that go with it, and none of those oddities from the subsequent movies. Roll, dodge and chase down your enemy using lasers, missiles and variants that can disable enemy ships and win the day. The game does offer some strategy as well, as you can change various loadouts such as differing laser types, engines and missiles, and you can also divert power to your engines, weapons or shields if that ship has them, as well as boost shields back or front, which lends some on-the-spot thinking, though I find I just get up close and personal and pump it all into the weapons and blast away. The game has a campaign mode that sees you taking control of both a Rebel and an Empire character. It will swap between these as the story progresses the missions, doling out different ship types thereafter, depending on your role in that mission. Though later on you do get some limited choice on which ship you want to take out. Here's where I hit one of my first gripes. I was very much hoping there would be a separate campaign for each side, and while I get what they've gone for, both sides of the coin and all that, and how they invariably might bump into each other, it just doesn't really do it for me. Let me explain a little bit more why, because the story interlinks as one, which arguably it could have done as two separate tales anyway. There's not much in the way of player choice. I would have really liked to seen a choice of missions on the briefing table, with varying difficulties and optional mission goals. Nothing hugely complex, but some more variety. Perhaps akin to House of the Dying Sun, where doing these missions could unlock a few treats for your ship. Missions are a bland affair at best, and while I appreciate it's perhaps only so much you can do in these settings, other games of this genre have been far more creative for many years now. It tends to over-rely on how cool it looks and the fact that it's old-school Star Wars, while it force-feeds the player all the mechanics of each ship class, which I'm fine with, but it really drags some of them out. It's fair to say the story acts as a tutorial for the multiplayer, as it clearly lets you try each ship and tells you what each one does and how it works many times. Do you have to or need to play the story first? No, not at all, not if you have even half an idea of what these games are about. And they're far from complex. Well, it's probably a good idea to have a quick go first, just to get used to the controls and so on. Here you can choose your ship, and each faction has 4 fighter types and an equivalent. So the X-Wing / TIE Fighter is an all-rounder, the A-Wing and Interceptor is nippy and aggressive dogfighter, the Y-Wing / TIE Bomber are bombers, and the TIE Reaper and the U-Wing act as support. You can play about with the loads-outs of these as well, and different lasers, missile support features, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. There are 2 game modes in multiplayer, and I was glad to see that they've got an all-out dogfight mode, as too many games now don't even bother with that, and they just come up with some convoluted, clever PvP mode that nobody ever asked for. Looking at you, Doom Eternal. Dogfights are fun enough with 5v5 and the first to 30 kills win, or whoever's got the most before the timer runs out. And this is the PvP mode you would pick if you've got no mates and want to queue solo, I would say. The second multiplayer mode, which requires you to hit rank 5 before playing, presumably to get you used to the systems, which honestly aren't that deep, is Fleet Battles. I find this entry barrier odd, especially as Fleet Battles has a dedicated tutorial. Wouldn't that be the entry barrier? But this is the game to a T. It holds your hand a lot. God forbid you try and work out any of the systems by yourself. Each side defends a flagship from the other. In addition to your human teammates, there are also AI ships zipping about. Destroy these and the enemy players, and your team will gain morale, fill the bar in your favour, and you'll get a crack at the enemy defences, and ultimately their flagship itself. It's a tug of war, as it were, and of course the opposition can pull it back. This mode I would recommend if you're using voice chat, or better still, just go in with friends. Having a fleet that are using comms and working together with a decent mix of ship types will benefit greatly over a team that are not communicating and just picked whatever ship they thought looked cool. The TIE Interceptor, by the way, in case you're wondering, that's the coolest looking ship. And be warned, There are already some quite annoying metas out there. You also gain ranks from these modes and currency to upgrade your ship, as well as purchase cosmetic upgrades, decals, paint jobs, etc. There's really not a lot of these to go for, but it's something. Just to note, there aren't any microtransactions in this game to unlock these either. Graphically, the game is fine. Looks great, in fact. Runs well enough through desktop mode at least, and as for controls, I use a standard PS4 controller on my PC, and that's fine for the most part, but I do hear that the throttle and stick works very nicely as well, if you can get that up and running. Now, we know this runs fine on PC monitor or TV, but it also works in VR. It was built for it, in fact. There's clearly something very off with this mode on the PC. I can't attest for the console versions, as I've not tested those. VR on the PC is where some of the issues arise. I've seen no end of people banging on about how it really comes to life the second you put on the headset, and it's here where 9-year-old me gets his dream come true. Perhaps I'm dead inside. The VR experience, at least on the PC, is not that great in my opinion. Technical issues prevail, from glitching graphics in some areas, odd flickering to outright crashes, and even when it does work as intended, it fails to impress me. Yes, it looks great, and I can look around the cockpit and see my fellow pilots left to right. I can hunt down other players, perhaps with more accuracy than just using a monitor. It's just not the bugs so much to me as it's all a bit boring. It just doesn't engage me the way I thought it would. Perhaps I've had my fill of space sims and dogfights, and not even VR can reignite it. It's certainly one of the least impressive VR titles I've played to date. I appreciate that might not be a popular opinion, and that's fine. I have to be honest with you though, I'm incapable of putting on a hype voice and pretending this game is anything other than average. And just to be clear, I'm not saying VR does not change the experience. Obviously it has a huge impact. It's just a bit boring. Originally, my review of this was going to be so scathing to the point I was going to call it a rant more than a review, but I reeled it in and had a second take. After all, it's just a game, and despite my observation, it is only 35 notes. It's not a full price game. That said, if it were a tenner, I would feel the same. It's almost bland in execution. VR does not save it, on the PC at least, and to take such an exciting concept and make it almost boring is quite a feat. While I appreciate the design decision to go for first person only and not third person, or should I say ship view, so not to give a competitive edge, hurts the game, as many of us would have liked to be able to control the ship from that view. They could have introduced a third and first person only server, and in story mode, why would this even matter? And yes, it would be odd in VR, but just don't have that option for VR players. I say that as if it's easy as flicking a switch. Of course, I'm sure it's not. If you're only here for the story mode, you may be well disappointed, and if you're only here for the PvP, again, there are only 2 modes, and a limited amount of rewards to keep anyone going for any length of time. Others have praised it for being an Electronic Arts game that doesn't contain any microtransaction. Yeah, well, that's fine and well, but giving a plus point for something that shouldn't even happen in the first place is a pretty moot point. Well done for not doing that crappy thing you did before. Here's 10 points. It's a simple game that pretty much achieves what I presume it sets out to do and no more. The fact that it's a Star Wars space fighter with the original ships may well be enough for a lot of people, and perhaps that's all you really need to know, and that's all I should have said about it. I'm sure it'll be on many a person's Christmas list, and you could certainly do worse, but you could do better, and so could have Electronic Arts. Cheers.